answer to it, but they should have at least made it more democratic. It's all done behind closed doors, who's screwing who over and what the penalties might be, and no public input. Really a disaster. No liberal society would, if it's really liberal, allow a major part of its industry and economy to be done in secret. That's just a no-no, and a lot of what's going on now is. You may have heard about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Somebody heard of that? Yeah. That's going on now in secret. I mean, literally, they're meeting behind closed doors in Washington and coming up with this new super trade pact, which will encompass, I guess, the whole Pacific Rim, which means virtually all the Asian countries. I don't know if India's included there, probably. That will devastate what's left of our economy, so I can tell. Because these people can work for such cheap wages with no employee rights, no unions, no protection. And so we're not going to see an end to this loss of industry. And granted, we have probably still the world's best higher education. We can create new product and so on, but that can't keep pace, I think, with the number of workers that are being thrown out of work. We'll innovate, develop some new industries, but I can't see how it's going to make up for lost ground. I really don't see what's going to happen to American workers who just get a high school degree, and that's still the majority of workers in our country. Another gridlock thing, it seems impossible to raise taxes to meet public needs, both at the federal level and at the state level. There are efforts. The deal that Obama created, that's how it will bear out, we'll see in the next few weeks with the conservatives, and they promised that in return for some concessions of cutting some benefits, we're not told which ones, he will be allowed to raise some taxes. I mean, he had to get down on his knees and beg for this, and that's something that will be played out in the next few months, I guess. It's just so hard to raise taxes in Washington as well in the state level, and I think that's I blame libertarian thought on that, because libertarians want a small government, a very small government, enough to maintain law and order and protect the basic rights of people, property and contract for sure, but none of the liberal kind of commitment to public education, to research, to regulating industry so we don't die from air pollution or water pollution, that kind of thing. Libertarians think that kind of stuff has to go. And there's this mantra in Washington, don't raise taxes. Fatal, public bought into it, I guess. It's pretty much a guarantee you'll lose office if you campaign on raising taxes. But we need to raise taxes in certain places. Government can do good things and can cause the economy to flourish, as well as the need for education and infrastructure and that kind of thing. You may disagree with that, but I think that's inevitable, I mean, obvious. And it just infuriates me that there's this kind of axiom in Washington that if you raise taxes, you're going astray. There's something wrong with that. Also keep in mind, background on this, who gets the biggest hunk of the federal budget every year? Let me call it the discretionary budget. There's the entitlement budget, which doesn't come up for renewal every year, the Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. Medicaid does, but Medicare, health care for the elderly, and Social Security are called entitlement programs, but the people who get them pay into them, into their paycheck. You pay into your paycheck for Medicare too. Those are kind of treated differently from the general budget. Who gets the biggest hunk of the general budget every year?
Defense budget gets about 50% plus.
Who does?
Defense.
Military, right. Huge, just huge. Right off the top, with hardly any discussion. What's the current annual budget? I think it's $3 trillion, but the discretionary budget that I'm talking about is closer to $1 trillion. They get $500 billion without hardly any discussion, because we're always going to war somewhere. That just drives me nuts. To the credit of libertarians and good liberals, libertarians are very much opposed to some of the wars we get into, and I'm certainly with them on that. And liberals, good liberals too, are opposed to this. But we have a particular American disease here that I don't see any easy answer to, that we have grown to view ourselves as the world's policemen. So we're always running around, supposedly putting out fires, but oftentimes stirring up wherever we go, like Iraq, Afghanistan. Now we're trying to get a war going with Iran. countries we don't even speak the language, don't know the culture, but these cost trillions of dollars. What Iraq has cost something like, depending on who you're talking to. Joseph Stiglitz, Pulitzer Prize-winning economist, figures we're going to end up spending, if you count veterans benefits and so on, $4 to $5 trillion, right off the top. That was put on a credit card, by the way. You're going to pay for that out of your paycheck over time. Thank you for that, George Bush. And Afghanistan, it's going to be in the trillions. Huge expenses like this that don't improve the quality of Americans' lives. We don't even rebuild our infrastructure these days. We don't have the money for it. That's because we're fighting wars everywhere. So, but that's a peculiar American thing that goes back to our history of the Cold War, where we, constantly had this arms race with Russia, built up this enormous military, which is still growing. And I don't know an easy answer how to turn that around. There are some good books out there of people who point this out and try to show ways we might go. I don't think the American public, maybe I'm misreading them, thinks we ought to be the world policeman, but it's sure easy for politicians in Washington to scare people into thinking, there's this horrible threat to our safety and so on. Look at how easy it was for Bush to, on dishonest information, tell us, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was in league with Al-Qaeda, both total bullshit, but that got us into a 10-year war. Incredible. I guess one thing you have to say about the public opinion is the public is too easily frightened by high-level people in Washington saying there's some great danger out there. Look at the scare we're under now of terrorism all over the place. This is the dream for people who like the military, because this is going to be a permanent war against terrorism. Terrorism is never going to go away, but we have funded enormous amounts of money, 2 wars already, going after terrorists. I just don't see a nice answer there. But that's one reason why our domestic lives are suffering, and you're not getting the jobs you should and so on, is so many of them are going to the military. It's, millions of people have recognized this and spoken out, but if you're in Congress, that's a no-no. You don't question the fact that America is threatened, and you don't say, wait, we're spending too much money on the military. Don't get anywhere with that. The obvious thing everybody knows, there's widespread environmental destruction, all the mining that goes on and so on. I just read recently that they are now fracking for gas in Sacramento County. Did anybody have any say in this? Not that I know of. But that's terrifying because the threat to the environment is huge from this stuff. All the poisons they pump into the well to get the gas out. And we've got a very feeble response to climate change. God knows what it's going to take to turn people around on that. The seeming impossibility of raising taxes to meet public needs, I already mentioned that. The systematic attack on unions. They are really looked with disfavor by the powers that be. And libertarians don't have anything good to say about unions. At least have to put a word in for unions. If you look at what's happened over the last, say, 50, 60 years, you can thank unions as the primary factor for why we have a 40-hour work week and an 8-hour work day. Do you really want to work 10 hours a day or 12, the way people used to do? For opposing child labor, for OSHA, for occupational safety and health, because an awful lot of people, millions of people are injured and sometimes killed on the job. You can thank the unions as being a major factor in pushing for universal health care. They get an awful lot of bad press for undeserved reasons, I think. My father worked 6 days a week when I was a kid, and that was typical. And then you ruined Sunday morning going to church, so he had, one half of a day to do what he wanted. These are typically union benefits, but unions have all but disappeared, and the only big ones left are public employees, and they're taking a beating. Look at Wisconsin. Maybe California's next. So don't be too quick to badmouth unions. Granted, they have some laggards who are running the show and feather bedding and stuff like that, but they have done a lot of progressive stuff. Very dangerous in the U.S., I think, is the increasing corporate dominance of the political system. It's not as though, the powers that be, the ruling elites, badmouth government and so on, but they love government. They're the major ones who are doing all the lobbying because they can change the laws to make things benefit them. They are so much more powerful. I mean, it's pathetic. I belong to a lot of environmental groups. They may be able to, a good-sized one, maybe able to afford one lobbyist in Washington, if they can even do that, who's wearing himself out, running out, trying to talk to 100 different congressmen. When an oil company wants to lobby, they've got an army of lobbyists, 50, 100 of them, who flood Washington and hold big bashes for congressmen and so on. And they get their way, and they end up writing a lot of the rules. So again, not an easy thing to see how to correct, but this would be something, libertarians don't necessarily support this, liberals certainly don't. But libertarians have a problem, as far as I can see in libertarianism, of what to do about over large corporations, which are more and more writing our laws for us. Because libertarians value the free market a lot, so do liberals. But you have less and less of a free market when you have huge corporations that dominate an industry, 2 or 3 corporations that control things. Like in agribusiness, about 4 huge corporations control 80% of the food supply. That's just crazy. That's not a free market system. And the big 6 in the oil companies control the oil and gas, that kind of thing. So corporations love government, even though they will run ads bad-mouthing government. They get a lot of things they want out of government. They'd be terrified if government went away. They need laws that will protect their thing. But how do you break up these big corporations? I don't know. We lost track of doing that when Reagan came in. Antitrust used to be part of the liberal program. Reagan, not liberal, but even the liberals have seemed to have given up on it. And we really pay for that because they become so powerful, too big to fail, the banks in Wall Street. That's a crazy system. You don't have a free market when you have huge corporations that are too big to fail. That's the opposite of a free market. So there's a difference, there's a question mark, I guess. How can libertarians who want a small government, how can they bring about a breaking down of these huge corporations? Liberals have some problem too, but they don't mouth the mantra of government ought to be really small. They think if it's well run, government can be large. Finally, we have this huge gridlock in Washington and many state governments. California suffers from it. They unable to solve problems, partly because there are a lot of factors going on here, but part of it's ideological. There are the liberals against the conservatives, many of whom are libertarian. One wants a small government, the other wants a larger government, thinks it's necessary, and they oftentimes don't compromise. It'll be interesting to see what Obama's second term looks like, because he's been famous for trying to compromise and then just getting hammered by the conservatives as no compromise at all. It's quite astounding what's been going on in Washington. Maybe he will change his tactics, I don't know. I'm holding my fingers. That he will come up with a new approach. But anyway, to get to the philosophical issues here, who has the better response to these problems, the liberals or the libertarians? Again, I'm ruling out here more extreme cases of there are anarcho-liberals, libertarians, who want to virtually do away with government. I'm not talking about them, that seems to be incredibly extreme. I can't imagine this country have 300 million people living without any government. And the other extreme on the left of a wholesale socialist takeover, that's not even in the cards. And there's things to say for and against that, but I'm not advocating for that. I'm talking about the mainstream liberalism and whatever you call it, mainstream libertarians, which would not include, I think, Ayn Rand, whom everybody's reading these days. She's a hard libertarian, has some really, really extreme positions. I think she said in one of her works, taxation ought to be voluntary. Lots of luck there. She's a piece of cake. She is, in my opinion, maybe you admire the woman, but she has an outright contempt for the little guy, which includes most of us. She thinks, there are, maybe she read a lot of Nietzsche, there are superior people who should run the show, and the rest of us should, pick up what scraps we can. But she's enormously popular. Ryan, the vice president nominee, had all of his staff read Ayn Rand as a condition of working for him. Alan Greenspan headed the Federal Reserve until 8 or 10 years ago, considered a guru in Washington. I don't know why he never saw the housing bubble blow up in our face. Seems like he should have noticed that. But anyway, he was an ardent fan of, in fact, I think he wrote a foreword to one of her books. Big fan of Ayn Rand. But I'm not viewing her as the spokesperson for libertarianism. There are more sane libertarians and more humane libertarians out there these days. So where are we here? The libertarians do tend to blame, speaking loosely, many of the problems we just looked at on big government. Government is the cause of these problems. Reagan certainly thought that. He had a big libertarian streak in him. The fact that government's substantial role in all modern liberal countries has been endorsed by democratic majorities. We elect our leaders. They go and pass these programs that have made for big government. It's been a democratic process. Just shows for libertarians that the mass public opinion can be badly mistaken too. They're just wrong in thinking the direction we're going in big government is a justified one. So what are some more specific differences? One of the big differences, item 3 on the handout, a major philosophical difference is over property and contract rights. These approach a near sacred status for a libertarian in many